Okay, well, good evening, everyone. And this is Jane Harvey speaking. I was your president last year, and now I've been very fortunate to be asked to stay as a trustee. Many of you will have been to our 2 previous webinars on this subject. And if you haven't, you're very welcome to join us now. We're going to have a really interesting evening, but I want to stress it's a collaborative effort. We want to share with you our ideas and also you to share your ideas with us. I've got 2 fellow trustees with me, Helen, who you've already met, and Stephen, who I'm sure most of you have met anyway, and it's great to be here with them. And I'm now going to hand over to Stephen, who will start with the presentation.
Hello, I'm Stephen. We haven't met, nice to meet you. And my job is to be the historian of the event to begin with. So I'm just going to tell you about why we're here, what happened in the previous 2 webinars that Jane just mentioned, and what we're hoping to achieve this evening. So the first thing is, if you've got a question at any point, as Jane says, if you can put a Q into the chat, and then Jane will spot it, and at an appropriate time, we'll ask somebody, see if they can answer it for them or not. Helen has told you that everything will be shared on the speaking endorsement webpage of the ALL website, which we'll remind you of during the session as well. You'll see the link coming up again, so don't worry about that. And the PowerPoint and everything will also be shared with you. So anything you want to look back on or share with your colleagues in school, for example, you're welcome to do that. Okay, so going back into our little bit of history, you'll remember that before the summer holiday, Ofqual, who are the body that looks after the exam boards and exams in general, in schools in particular, was tasked by the Department for Education to think about the GCSE in 2021, given the fact that a lot of students had lost school time already in summer term 2020 and were likely to lose more in the autumn term of 2020. So they gave them instructions about what they might do and what they might not do. And then Ofqual came up with a proposal which they have to put out to consultation. That's whatever they come up with, they have to put it out for consultation to get some responses first of all. So the proposal came out, and we had our first webinar in July, as you can see, to discuss that proposal, which was including the suggestion that the way to save some time in languages GCSE course was to take the speaking exam out of the GCSE requirement and instead replace it by what they call a teacher endorsement. Now, endorsement is a word a lot of teachers don't know. It's quite an old-fashioned word, so I know it pretty well. Endorsement, literally, those people who have a French in particular will know it means when you sign something on the back, endorsement. The do is the dos in the middle of it.
Oh.
So the idea of an endorsement is that it's like a recommendation from the teacher. It's the teacher saying, this is a student that I know. I think they fit into this particular area of achievement. And that's what I'm saying. And I've been doing things throughout the year to evaluate that particular statement. Those of us who have got more grey hairs than others will remember when this was indeed the standard thing of what we did in the classroom. We used to have a scheme called graded objectives. I'm just looking in the chat to see if anyone's saying yay for graded objectives, which we did throughout Key Stage 3 certainly, and which was all about endorsing things. The students would come, they would have a certificate, and they would gradually fill it in saying, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And then they would come to the front of the classroom and prove it. And then we would sign it. And we were endorsing their achievement. There's a yay from Jane. Thank you very much. So evaluating in the classroom is not something that is new. It's something we've done before. But for a lot of younger teachers, it is a little bit alien. It's not at all like the GCSE that they're used to with its high stakes testing at the end of year 11. So our first webinar in July was to discuss that proposal. And there was quite a lot of heated debate about why speaking, could it not be this, could it not be that? All sorts of examples that we sent back to Ofqual, and they responded and said, thank you for giving that feedback. But they still decided in August, as you can see there, that they would go with this direction to move speaking out of the exam into endorsement. and to provide criteria, common assessment criteria for all the languages, so that teachers would know how to compare with each other. English, as Vincent says, has already got speaking as an endorsement. That used to be a requirement of their GCSE as well, and that came out a few years ago. I'm not quite sure how long, but a number of years ago. So that was in August that we had that decision from Ofqual. And then in September, I think it's the next screen, Helen, we had our next webinar, which I shall mention obviously just in a moment. So these were the suggestions that came, the main suggestions that came from that decision in August from Ofqual around our area of the curriculum. The main thing you can see on there is that this is applying for summer 2021. It's not a general statement about GCSE in the future. So the speaking test as part of the exam will not take place. There will not be an official speaking test, so the exam boards won't create one. Speaking will be reported on as a teacher and school endorsement. So the school has to ensure that the students have the opportunity to be endorsed. So they've got to provide you with the scope to do the evaluation that you'll be doing, as you can see in the next bullet point, as part of teaching and learning. So the recommendation from Ofqual is that it shouldn't be a separate exam with all the stress, preparation and anxiety that goes with that. It should be the sort of thing that goes on in the classroom. There's no requirement for recorded evidence, so we don't need to make recordings. We don't need to have things written down on check sheets or that sort of thing, or doing them in exam conditions. And then the final point there is that the endorsement is outside the grading system. So the grading will be based on the 3 other skills, and the endorsement will be reported on as either pass or merit, which is the next one up, or distinction, which is the best one, or not classified if the student hasn't shown that they've matched any of the criteria that we're going to look at. Again, the link is at the bottom of the screen there. All of the documents and a digest of the Ofqual documents are on that page for people who don't want to wade through them. I use the verb wade because they're quite dense documents, and because they're documents for the exam boards, they're sometimes a bit legalistic and a bit technical. So you'll find it a quicker way to find out what they said on that speaking endorsement page on the ALL website. Thank you, Helen. So, then the criteria came out. These were open to consultation. And so our second webinar was to discuss those criteria, try to understand them, digest them, and see how they were supposed to fit in with what we were doing. Now, the ones in red are the things that are happening just at the moment. So then we got well, that's the one we had, which is now reported on the website, the final version of the criteria post-consultation. And then this is very recent, this document from the exam boards called Additional Speaking Guidance for Range of Language has only just come out very recently. Helen's going to be talking about that in just a moment, so we can pick out what that might mean for us. And then just in the last couple of weeks, we've got the Ofqual announcement about principles for making exams more accessible. This is the one we've just seen a question about in the chat, whether vocabulary lists will be available, that sort of thing. We won't do that until January. And today they have launched the consultation on those principles. They always consult on everything, so that's just like a historical note for you. You don't need to respond to that consultation in particular. So in January, they will get more details about the principles, and then in the rest of January and February, there will be support sessions run by some of the exam boards. Some of them, like Edexcel, have already done those, but AQA will be doing those in January and February. Okay, so we are doing this as a sharing webinar. That's our idea. And the first part of it is us, basically Helen. Helen is in the position of doing this with her year 11 in school anyway at the moment. So she's had to think quite hard about this. So Helen is going to be going to be setting off, talking about the Ofqual requirements, and then highlighting that new document I just mentioned, the guidance and the exam boards. And then I'll be coming back later on to help us to do the sharing together. And that's where we're trying to go to try to pull together ideas from everyone who's here about what we already do in the classroom by way of speaking, and how we can create a menu to help teachers think about how they could fit in the speaking endorsement activities they want with their teaching of the other skills, which are obviously going to be examined in the traditional way. So that will create a document which we'll be putting on the same speaking endorsement webpage. So everything will be on that webpage after the weekend, I would imagine. I think that's my introduction. So now I'm going to pass on to Helen.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thanks. And there are some questions in the chat. We will be dealing with those later on, if that's okay. So the first aim of this webinar, as we said, was to share updates which have happened since our last webinar. And this is to draw attention to where you can find these GCSE subject level conditions for 2021. That's the title of it, which detail the requirements, which I'm going to look at now. So there's the link to it. You go to this page here, you scroll down and you find amongst all of the subjects the one for languages, and then you can download that as a PDF. It's about a 16-page document. And as Stephen has already mentioned, all of the comments that we made, all of the links that we talk about, he's curating this wonderful page where you can just go there to find all of the links that you need. So what about these requirements? It really is, it is a long document, and there is a temptation just to look at the criteria for the endorsement and then just start asking questions about, oh, but what does it mean? What do they mean by themes, contexts, purposes, etc. And that's why we thoroughly recommend taking the time to read at least pages 15 and 16, which explain what is expected. And that's going to save you time when you're deciding how to implement the process. And it means that you can answer colleagues' questions with authority if you've actually read it from the source. Now, I'm not going to read aloud these pages to you now, but I am going to flash before you the paragraphs as a copy and paste. And you'll see that the paragraphs really are things which are answers to probably the frequently asked questions about this speaking endorsement. So if you know all of this off by heart, you can go and have a cup of tea for the next 5 minutes and then come back again. But that's what my intention is to do over the next few minutes. So in fact, what we've done is for each of the paragraphs, we've put together what the question could be for that paragraph. Right, so let's go. So this then again throughout, I won't keep on repeating it, but this is the bit that's copied and pasted from the document, and this is our question. So they are assessed in normal teaching and learning time, not in a formal context. So there's no need or requirement for a speaking test, although you can if you wish to. So, and as a result of that, there's no need for evidence. So you have a conversation at the beginning of a lesson with the pupil, no need to record it. That will just add to your judgment of their standard. You're actively encouraged to share not only the criteria with your learners, but also your judgment about the level at which they are working. That way they know what they have to do to show and what to show in order to improve. And when the final endorsement comes, it's not going to be a surprise. You've already shared that with them. And this is really, really important because that cuts through a whole range of possible complications if in the end a question is raised as to why have I got that endorsement. So that really is a very, very strong recommendation. The words contexts, themes and activities with different purposes are used, and these are explained in the following paragraphs. So learners have to show that they can speak about a variety of things. Obviously, you're not allowed to do something which is just only simply on one topic, like talking about themselves. And the most obvious of the things they have to talk about is grouped under the word themes. And we're familiar with these. And I expect most of us have got a scheme of work where, hopefully you're nearing the end of the book or what you want to cover. And in the last few weeks, we revise all the themes ready for the writing and the listening and the reading. So through doing this, our opportunities for speaking will automatically allow for a broad coverage of themes. So can I just remind you again that this is just from the Ofqual text here. But let's take it a stage further. Given that we're in January of year 11, we want to make the very best use of the remaining time for the 9:1 graded elements to make, really to help them on that 9:1. And actually, by doing that and helping them to do the listening, reading and writing, we will be doing speaking. So you're getting the best of both worlds. So you don't need to have a specific time for doing the speaking endorsement. It should really arise totally naturally out of the activities that you do anyway for listening, reading and writing. So learners have to speak for different purposes. Most utterances, I think, can be categorized anyway as, you make affirmations through your presentation, descriptions, narrations, and so on. Secondly, you can sometimes give orders. And the other thing is you ask questions. I know often when I'm talking with children, I say those are the 3 things you tend to do. You're affirming, giving people orders, or asking questions. So the purposes outlined here give you some suggestions about how you can allow pupils to evidence that range. Now, in the context of this Ofqual document, the word context is really used to emphasize that you can get your evidence from hearing pupils speak during a whole class activity or in pairs. It doesn't have to be one-to-one with the teacher. And I don't think that they can really insist that it must be in a certain context. So that's why it's written as learners can demonstrate their speaking skills in this way. So, for example, those students who are being examined in a private capacity, there it will have to be just through the one-to-one interaction with the teacher, because they're not in a classroom and they haven't got a pair. So I think that's really to explain the word context. So how are those principles put into the criteria? What do they look like? Here's a copy and paste then. So there are 3 levels and a not classified. And note that the word assessor is used. It's the assessors who do this. It doesn't say teachers. So the person making the decision doesn't have to be a teacher. The assessors just have to be required to be totally sure of what they're doing. So this paragraph tells you about the range of activities. We now know what it means to have themes, purposes. Tasks haven't been defined, but we know that the expectation is that they do whatever you usually do in class. So what the work is that you set, what do you do? And actually note here that they don't use that word contexts. So I think that really is this idea of it's telling you that's how you can gather the information in whatever way you can. It's the same criteria whether you're doing foundation or higher for the other papers. And whereas in an exam, pupils have to tick lots of boxes, don't they, within that short time, within that 10 minutes you're with them. Here, they're really making the point that these skills can be demonstrated across time and separately. So here's the table with the criteria as it's been issued. And there's not a lot of change since the proposed ones, but we have noticed a few slight changes which have been in response to ideas from people, particularly about making things just a little bit more readable and a bit more consistent. So that's the way it is. And then if you were at our last webinar, you'll remember perhaps that I'd done a formative assessment friendly version, which some people liked and some people didn't. But it's something which might make it easier to discuss with pupils where they are and what they have to do to develop. So I've designed it so you've got 1 grid per element rather than 1 grid per level. So here in the communication and interaction, which is absolutely the most important one, you can follow through and see, well, what is it that you've got to do to get from pass through to distinction. Okay. Now, when it comes to, that was communication interaction, you've then got range of language, and in particular note that it does say refer to the grammar requirements set out in the awarding organisation specification. That's what we're going to come on to later as to what are those requirements. And that was something which I think a lot of people mentioned in the feedback, and they've done something about that. You've then got something on accuracy, and then there's pronunciation. And I've done a little version, if anyone's interested, where it all fits onto an A4, if you did want to share that with the students possibly. I was really delighted that the exam boards did get together and they had defined a range for each of the levels. Now here's one which it's been, all of the exam boards have issued it. I'm just showing you the one which came from AQA. So they're all exactly the same. And for each level, they've given a description and also an example of the indicative performance. And these are always divided into these 4 areas. So what sort of sentences can you do? What sort of structures? What sort of verbs? And they've just got, ideas as to what they are. And what about the tenses? So that's there for pass. And then there's one for merit. And now distinction. It's just one long document. So just as with the speaking criteria, and again, this will be available if anybody wants to use it. Oh, people are asking how to get hold of it. This is everything that we're showing here now. We'll be putting as a link from the website which Stephen is curating, the ALL website. Is that right? We'll put the link in the chat there. So here again, then is if you like an assessment, a formative assessment friendly version, where for each of the areas this time I've put it from pass, merit, distinction. Because I've shared this with the pupils, actually I took the words pass, merit, distinction out. I just showed them that way. That was my decision to do that, but you can obviously write in those if you wanted to. So there are the structures, there are the verbs, and here are the time frames. So just to show you, to test it out, to see whether it worked with my year 11, I did give them into their class notebook. I pasted this and I said, could you indicate where you're really comfortable about it, put it in green. If you're nearly comfortable, put it in yellow. And if you're not sure, just leave it out. And I found just by clicking through 30 of those, I got a little bit of an idea myself as to how they were. So that was a more confident person. This is a less confident person there. So that's brought us up to the end of giving you up to date of decisions that have been made since we last met. And we know that there are possible other changes to be happening in January, but we're not going to speculate on those now. So now we're just going to start sharing ideas, and we've got some ideas as to how we could structure that here. So the first one could be thinking about how are you going to share the criteria with the pupils. So I'm going to give you an overview of what we're going to discuss, and then we'll discuss it. So first of all, how are you going to share the criteria with the pupils? How will you involve the pupils? What? Sorry. Yeah. And then the next one, Dave was just checking that Stephen isn't taking over at this point. He's worrying that I'm going. No, we did agree. Well, are you? It is me now, is it?
No, it is me actually.
Oh, it's you. I'm sorry.
All right. But you're saying just the same as I was going to say, so that's perfectly all right. So,
okay,
yeah,
let me go back. I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry.
So no, you're fine on that screen, Helen.
I'm fine on that screen, right.
So yes, there is as Helen said in the document from Ofqual, a strong recommendation that teachers should share the criteria with the students. So that's something obviously we need to think about. As Helen said, it's quite a helpful, formative thing for them to understand anyway. But what we want to talk about when we come on to the questions individually in just a moment is how. How will you do that? What sort of setting would you do that in? Is it something you do in writing? Is it something you do as a whole class activity? All those sorts of things. And also the thing about working at, which obviously is helpful to them at the same point. So that's going to be one of the areas of our discussion. And then question 3 is I think going to be the next most important one of those. So in your current scheme of work, obviously you are focused on the things they're going to have their examination in, as Helen said, on the writing, the listening and the reading. We know that when you are teaching students how to write, speaking comes into that because you very often rehearse in speaking before you get them to write. You get them to experiment with different possibilities, to construct things in different ways. When they are doing listening, obviously you help them to learn how to listen by speaking to them. So we're trying to get to think in that particular question about what things lend themselves to having a speaking element, which could help to inform your idea of the level you're going to put them at in their endorsement at the end of the time. And then number 4, obviously anything else is because there is always something else. And I'm sure there are some questions, Jane, in there already which are on the theme of anything else. I don't know if there's one, Jane, you want to ask now? You're mute at the moment, Jane. Oh.
Sorry, Stephen. No, we're okay for the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so now this is where we're going to try and encourage you to use the chat as much as you can. There are rather too many of us for just to open up a discussion. So that's why we're going to get it written down in there, and then we're going to collate it and edit it into a format that we can share with others, again, through that same web page, the speaking endorsement page of the ALL website. Okay, so how will we share the criteria? And I'm just going to read one or two of the comments out as they start to appear. So how do you think you will share these criteria with your Year 11 students, and when and in what sort of format? And your comments are coming in too quickly for me to read. So I'm just going to go back up a little bit there. So there's Vincent suggesting, are people doing a lot less speaking, especially pupil to pupil in class because of COVID? The evidence we've been getting from our members in ALL is yes, they have. And also because they've sort of stepped back a little from doing the sort of speaking they would normally do because of this change in the regulation. So Laurence is saying, I think before each activity, the pupils should have success criteria written with an example. That sounds to me a bit like a test sort of activity. Of course, we don't have to do them as tests. It could just be a practice routine, a conversation in the classroom about something else. So maybe that's a little too formal for my interpretation. Mary Grace is saying, when we're tackling writing on a certain theme, one of the pages in each theme pack is a set of questions that they might need to answer. We tackle these as an oral first. So there we are. That creates a spider diagram. So that's a great suggestion. And Vincent again, before we share the criteria, we'll have to explain what the endorsement is. That's true. And the fact that it's not part of the grade. Yes. And that's where you have the issue of students' understanding and their response to that.
Can I just say there, I suppose, well, why are we saying it's not part of the grade 9 to 1, but it is part of what is reported. Yeah. So it's really stressing, as Vincent said, it's then the student deciding whether or not they care, whether or not it says not classified after the number they're given.
So Alex is talking about self-assessment and peer assessment. Of course, some of the speaking as well might not actually happen in the classroom if you've got students who are at home, or if you've got people, if you're giving them homework that includes a speaking element, they might be making recordings of themselves. You can still listen to those, you can still gauge from that how their performance relate to some of the criteria. Knowledge organizer for practice of accent and intonation, conversation questions. One-to-one speaking activity, this is Ruth. I put a highlighted dot on each bit that they had achieved, okay. Mary, another Mary. Create a student-friendly PowerPoint explaining the criteria and breaking it up. How the system gives them opportunities in the classroom, okay. And Ruth shared the criteria. Oh, that's the same one I've just read. Irene, a working document they can reflect on, like you're highlighting, Helen. So there's someone who likes your grid, Helen. There's one win-win for you. What is the value of the endorsement? So that's a big question. The value of the endorsement is, as Helen said, that it's part of the GCSE award for this year. It's part of their certification, and it gives them a validation of the work that they've been doing in languages. We can't divide speaking from the rest of the skills we do in languages just because we're saving time. Remember, that's the only point of them making this requirement, to save us time. That doesn't mean we're not doing the speaking and that speaking isn't important. So it's about raising the profile.
And it will be on the certificate. It's not, you know, it will be on their certificate, what their endorsement is.
Okay. Jennifer, they can look at the criteria to see if which one they would get, yes, and how to make those examples better. a pupil-friendly version of the criteria they can refer to at all times. Modelling from the teacher, Vocaroo, okay, there we go. Moat and Vocaroo, things I know nothing about, they sound fascinating. Modelling from the teacher and direct reference to the criteria. Flipgrid, and Sabine is saying, we've communicated with parents and students in class and shared those criteria. We're organising an exam, okay, and only testing the conversation and a second theme. Evidence for CAGs if necessary. Helen, do you have anything to say about that?
You're talking about the CAGs. Somebody said about
Yes.
the CAGs.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we need to work on the basis that there will be exams, and the fact that Ofqual just announced last week that there'll actually be a further series of exams in July for anybody who hasn't been able to sit the exam in June. I think it's highly unlikely that you're needing to have evidence for CAG. So I think we'll work on the basis that there will be an exam, which will be for the reading, listening and writing, and then to bring in the speaking endorsement, which really is promoting the importance of speaking as a skill in language. And I think perhaps as far as Vincent is concerned, just to be using it as an opportunity to say speaking is still really, really important. When students are entered for a language, they'll get a 9-to-1 and an endorsement. So I think our understanding is that it will be a U if they didn't get something, but we can double check that with the exam boards.
Mm. Yeah, so it's like when we used to do the graded objectives things, the certification was the motivation for them to carry on, really. So this is about that sort of motivation as well, and profile raising.
And a really good point from Alex there, isn't it? That of course it's in our interest to prepare for us for them to do speaking, because they're going to carry on speaking quite apart from needing speaking to do the others, which is what we're going to come on to later on, I think, aren't we?
Yeah, indeed, yes. Okay. Vincent's question, I don't know if we can answer this. If we don't do speaking, is it on the certificate?
That's what David said, but I think we need to follow that up, because certainly with the conventional GCSE, normally you have to be entered for all of the skills, don't you?
Yeah.
Otherwise you don't get a grade. So
And I'm sure there's a requirement on the Ofqual document that schools ensure that students have access to the endorsement.
yeah.
There's Sarah talking about future employers, whether they can really speak their language or not. They put a lot of emphasis on spoken skills. Okay, if they fail it, Carmen's question, this is where they get the what's the wording, Helen? If they don't get the pass, they get the
It's not classified. Do you know, I can't remember. I wrote it, didn't I?
yeah.
Not classified.
Not classified. Yeah.
It's almost so easy to get a pass if you just any bit of effort with a student. If they put the effort in, then they should be able to get a pass. And it's just that expectation of saying one way or another, whether it's in class or out of class, just put that effort in and you can get the speaking endorsement. And it really is just show the effort and your enthusiasm for speaking.
And you've got 4 months to do it in.
Yes.
You don't have to do it within a 7-minute slot.
Yeah. So Sue is saying she likes the idea of letting students self-assess and then the teacher seeing if they agree and using the grid to help them improve. Great for writing preparation too. Moat is getting a lot of love in the room this evening. Yeah, we do this in Key Stage 3, so it will make sense in Key Stage 4, says Annalise. Yeah, Alex is making the point about A level. Again, that's one of the values of the endorsement, to give them the idea that they are doing well at their speaking for if they are proceeding into the A level class.
Stephen, there's a question about the dates of exams. All of the GCSE exams are now in June in a very compressed period. But the speaking endorsement takes place over the next 4 months, and there's a date sometime in May when you have to submit the speaking endorsement level.
Yeah. So Irene's saying everything they do in speaking can be applied to the other skills. We can provide an audio example, as Laurence's suggestion.
You seem to be going into actually how you're going to, what you're going to do, which comes a bit later on. I don't know if you want to move on to
We are
that.
moving on into that, yes. I'm just going to read Florence's before I move on to the next question. I decided to tell them they are being assessed all the time, and this has had a huge effect, as they are now always putting up their hands and using the target language to ask questions, explanations, and so on and so on. That's a good outcome. That's great. Okay, so the next question then, about the after the criteria one. Helen, if you can proceed. The working at level, this is the one where you're looking at the 3 possible outcomes. You're not going to talk to them about them being not classified, I'm sure. How are we going to share that? How are we going to share that and how can we use that formatively? So we have started on this question already, I think. I'm just going to carry on going down the questions, the chat.
Can I just say, I've noticed some people have very generously said that they would share things. Yes, I think you can share it there. Or if you want to send anything to us, we could then put a link from our collection as well, which would be great.
So Jessica's asking, do we know in what circumstances our evidence might be requested?
No, it won't be. There's
It
no
won't be,
evidence.
it won't be requested at all.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Just the head of centre has to say that they've had an opportunity.
Yes.
So you may just need to think internally within the school, how do you record that they've had an opportunity, but no evidence whatsoever of the standard.
Okay, that's the dates question.
I think that's a good point from Sarah about sharing it soon so that they do have an opportunity to improve. But I'm wondering for some people, if they feel they've already got to distinction, perhaps you won't share it because they'll stop.
So Sarah's saying, I think you probably have to share their working at level as soon as possible so they can get an idea of where they need to head. Mary Grace is asking about the slides. The slides will be coming out in the link tomorrow, as will the recording. Told them they had to be consistent, a good point again from Florence. So they can't just be really good one day and not do anything else after that. That's a good lesson in life, I think. Yes, opportunities would be evidenced in your scheme of work or your lesson plans, as Sarah is suggesting. Yeah, Jessica making a point about psychology. They need to know there are criteria and a rigorous process, so they've earned their mark. Shared criteria. Yeah. Yes, to the thing about continuing progress rather than the one-off. Okay, now I've gone back to the top of the thing again. So I think we can maybe move on to the next question, Helen. There's a question about private assessors. Does anyone know anything about if you have a student who isn't in a school and has a private assessor?
I think the key thing is that the entry has to go through a centre, and that head of centre will need to certify that there was an opportunity. So it's whatever the head of centre deems to have been adequate for them to know that the endorsement has been done. So it's really a head of centre question, whatever that centre is that the person has been entered through.
And the assessor, I mean, I've been to things where they've said the assessor could be your foreign language assistant, for example. It's the centre is still responsible, but the assessor doesn't have to be a teacher.
Okay, so our other big question is the speaking opportunities that exist already in what you have planned. So we've got your 4 months left until exam time starts to loom. And the question is, you're obviously really busy with your writing and your listening and your reading, because that's going to be the focus of what they're doing in their exams. But at the same time, what things might fit in. So there's your first question. What would you normally do in speaking, even if there were no speaking test at all? And how can you use that to gather evidence? Particularly thinking about the purposes, themes, and contexts. So it's not going to be the same sort of activity every time. It's not going to be the same sort of task. Some of it will be with you, possibly. Some of it will be the whole class. Some of it will be between pairs or in groups, if you can manage that in your school at the moment. And that will lead us into if we need to add anything else. Obviously, adding things is difficult because you've got your scheme of work already, but you might have to think of something that will give you just that extra piece of evidence that you know. And then finally, the question about if you do have restrictions on what you're allowed to do in your class, made by your school or anybody else, then are there tweaks you could make to your scheme of work that would help to relieve that? Yeah, so then Vincent's reinforcing the message about being gentle with students when they're at a very stressful time in general. They can self-assess their work as a group. Let's not create work. That's a very important message from Alex. That's the whole point of this initiative. That's why the DFE brought it out in the beginning. It was to save time and effort, not to create work. So we don't want to create work.
I think, Stephen, there's a point coming up here about what notes and things they can have. Now, if they're, as they're in the normal classroom situation, they will have help to hand, won't they, for these?
Yes,
Absolutely.
you're allowed to have anything in normal circumstances, so it doesn't have to be exam conditions at all.
No, so they can have access to dictionaries, to their notes, to whatever.
Yeah. Stephen, do you want me to explain that slide that I've stopped on there?
Yeah,
or?
yes. Yeah.
So really, this is just as a prompt, I suppose, as people say what they would do anyway. So I've put here the things which I know as a year 11 teacher I'm looking at. I'm looking at writing, listening and reading. And I've highlighted the bits where the outcome will be that they're producing French. So that just as in speaking is productive, obviously writing. So it's almost, it could be that people are thinking that when you're preparing for the picture question for foundation, the 4 bullet point question for foundation, the overlap 90 word, the 150 word, or the translation, what sort of things might you be doing anyway, which involve speaking? On the listening and reading there, you have always got those target language questions where they have to answer in the target language. So those again are things where, you know, you'll naturally be using the language. So it's almost saying with preparing all of these, what are the opportunities for showing that? And on here, I've just put the sorts of things you might be doing of practicing or modeling the task. And then general revising vocabulary structures, grammars, all the drills and the games that we do. Which are the games, which are the drills where you use language? Normal classroom routine. How do you use target language? So that was really just to give an overview. And here I've just suggested there it could be that you're considering of those things, what has to be done at the same time as another person, what has to, whether it's online or in the classroom, what has to be done at the same time, synchronous. But are there things which actually can be done in an asynchronous way? So whether it's online or in the classroom. So that's really just to explain the little boxes. Oh, someone saying I can't see the presentation
No,
anymore.
the others can still see it.
Oh.
Everyone else is okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So Sarah is talking about a listening task that feeds into speaking. The photos are coming out. Quite a lot of people talking about using photos and using things they already have ready. Read, oh, that's Mrs. Lyon talking about reading out random sentences, and then things about pronunciation and intonation that would come out of that. Gilles Grignard is talking about a minute blah blah starter once a week, chatting on a random topic.
I think that Stephen, and there's Nina is concerned about whether, about assessing speaking ability. But again, I think it's have confidence in your own knowledge of the pupils and use, find the opportunities in what you're doing anyway. Don't create extra work.
Yeah.
You're covering you're covering the content, so you are going to have opportunities for them to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking that Nina might have a senior colleague who she can give the criteria to, who might come in just to make her feel better that she's making the sort of judgment that they think is fine as well.
Yeah.
Continuing as normal with the large collection of general conversation type questions, if that helps them build their stock of language for writing tasks. Trapdoors, tongue twisters for pronunciation. Say something different. Mastermind, 20 keys. So Jennifer's saying I still do as much speaking as before because what we do helps the writing. Sarah's going speed dating. When I've gone back to the top of the questions again. And I've gone back to good evening, everybody. Than that. Photo cards and role plays. That might be the end of where we got up to. Flippity. A very nice word to say on a Thursday evening. So I think we've covered the questions now, Helen. I don't know if you wanted to explore something else out of the other slides that you've got ready at the end, or whether you want to ask something else.
I'll be honest, I took those slides out because they were not meant to be there.
Oh, right, okay.
All I'd done was slides where for each of these elements, I just put a little reminder that we were looking at purposes and themes. And I suppose almost prompting, it may be that some themes lend themselves better to some aspects than others. Really, there are just so many very good ideas here. And, I think I don't know, did we say at the beginning, we were thinking of having then another webinar afterwards where we'd almost then, having had our examining sessions, we might bring together some other ideas. So
yes, so we're planning a further webinar in February after people have had their training sessions if they're with the AQA board, in which we would be able to talk about how things were going and whether there was anything else that we could exchange maybe. And there was a question just there about dictionaries from Mary, but I think she's saying in the exam criteria, it says they can't have dictionaries in the exams, but I think as they're clear, this isn't an exam, this is a normal teaching and learning.
Yeah.
Those words probably don't apply.
And just to say it's a definite as well, because I did get in touch with them to say, in preparation for this webinar, can you absolutely tell me definitely that they don't have to have those conditions. They said, no, it's just, as we've said, normal teaching and learning. You can have any access to anything you like.
And the speaking levels, Vincent's saying, is that in May that they need to be given in?
Yes, it's been, somebody wrote May the 7th. I was looking for the date beforehand, just couldn't find it, but we've had about 3 people who said May the 7th. So
yeah, Liliana saying, let's try to keep it simple. Very good advice.
Yes, it's giving them the chance, isn't it, as Liliana says, to show what they can do, but beyond a mere pass, which is probably where the vast majority of them are now, are at least now.
Yes, so is that, Vincent, have you written that since what we said, or is that before about the amount of scaffolding above? You can, in the end, it's a professional judgment, isn't it? You've got the criteria there. They're good questions.
Yes. Yes, and so Irene making the point that it's good for them to know where they are and where they would like to get to.
And I like the comment about loving the freedom to do what we want. That's great.
And I mean, I would echo what people are saying, that by saying, I mean, I'm really making a big thing of this, that this is very important. And I'm the person who's going to be making this judgment based on what I see over the next 4 months. So I love people commenting on the fact that children are therefore volunteering even more. And while I'm going through all of the, going through a 90 word and modelling the task with everybody, it's a constant question and answer as to what should we put next and what would you do next, and now what question could you ask or write. And I'm making it clear to them, I'm clocking what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's nice from Kirstine.
Yeah.
My pupils are enjoying speaking more in lessons now because it's less contrived. Carmen's asking, can a teacher decide to get the students to answer questions without support or materials, or is that not allowed? I think most things are allowed.
I suppose, I'll be honest, what I'm doing is because I think quite a lot of people have made this comment, we've been preparing for the conversation from, well, even in Key Stage 3, but certainly from the September Year 10. So a lot of us have got little conversation booklets that they're building up anyway. For the writing, they are going to have to still memorise stuff, aren't they, really? You are going to be in a situation where you're going to have it, you know, you won't have reference. So it's not to say that you're not going to make them memorise things. It's just you can decide what you use as your evidence. Is that, I don't know if that's clear, but you certainly don't have to make it that they're memorising everything, but you might still want to be making them memorise things.
And there are all sorts of different things that you can do. I mean, I'm noticing Vincent is sort of concerned around broadly in line with other schools and so on. I think it's just stepping back that little bit, and there are the criteria there. The support is not the issue that it is in some of the other bits. It's almost what can they produce against those criteria, particularly when they're broken down. And you may within a school wish to have some kind of moderation, but really again, you don't need to have records and so on. That would just be a school management decision. Yeah. But as far as the exam board is concerned, it's just coming down to that teacher judgment. And that's where the working at level is so important, because you can just be feeding that to the students. They know what they're doing. They know what they need to do to get to the next one. And it just gives that whole sense of involvement and understanding. And actually what we always want is for people to get engaged in formative assessment.
In Lawrence, I'd agree that, I mean, the 9-to-1 skills, we're acknowledging those tend to be our priorities over the next 4 months, but you use, I suppose the point we're trying to make is that you still speak, don't you? Even though you're doing listening, reading and writing, there'll be speaking happening anyway.
Lisa commenting on the importance of speaking for listening. Yes, the level of the endorsement, not the grade. That's right, Andy.
Yes, I agree, Lisa. This idea that normally sometimes the problem in listening can be understanding questions. Well, if you know how to say a question, I think that's a point that Dr. Rachel Hawkes is often making in her talks, is you must teach them how to ask questions, because then when they hear it, it won't throw them. Yes, that's right, Debbie. Foundation student could get a 4 distinction. So, for example, a native speaker who's perhaps not very good at writing can now not be penalised, if you like. They can get a 5 distinction.
Mm-hmm. So it looks as though we're coming towards a sort of a natural closing of that sharing from your side. Thank you very much for all of that. As I say, what we'll do is I'll make a copy of all the chat and then compile it into a sort of menu document answering the different questions we talked about, which will appear on the famous page, which we've now mentioned to you about 20 times this evening, the one called Speaking Endorsement on the ALL website, which is underneath the secondary tab, if that's how you like to look for things. I also wanted to mention that at the bottom of that page, there are some new content, which are articles about the importance of speaking and about the practice of speaking and all of the things associated with speaking. Some of those articles are brand new. There's an article from Vincent there, for example, which he wrote just a couple of months ago. And some of them are from the website elsewhere. I've just collated them all together. There's the link again from Vincent, thank you. So some of them are elsewhere on the website. They might be in one of the language zones or in the secondary zone, for example. And some of them are links to articles in the Language Learning Journal, which is of course available online to members. So you'll be able to look at older articles or slightly more research-based articles in there too. So if you feel like a bit of reading about speaking, then there's plenty of things there to keep you quiet, right at the bottom of the Speaking Endorsement page. Thank you very much for joining in.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, everyone. And we hope that's been helpful, and that you know, when we see you all again in February, we'll be able to hear how it's all gone and how practice has actually change the way you look at the things, and hopefully you'll be telling us how creative and liberating a way it is to assess students. So we're very much looking forward to meeting you all again in February. And thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Helen, for your hosting.
Well,
thank you both, Helen and Stephen,
for all of your curating. And thank you. Yes, lots of lovely ideas here. Just to warn you, I never throw everybody, we never throw anybody out. So this will just stay open until you all decide to leave.
How many did we have at the top? Anyone see how many we had at the most?
105.
I didn't.
105 apparently, says David.
Thank you, Krista.
It's nice that there's lots of people saying they found it reassuring, which is, you know,
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we were hoping would be the case.
Definitely.
Oh, and Vincent, you asked about if people are members of ALL. Yes, we didn't actually promote ALL, did we? Sometimes at the beginning we say, please join.
No, we didn't. Yes.
I think
those who are left, please join.
We mentioned the webpage quite a lot.
We did.
But we will know, because the Eventbrite, we asked people just to tick whether they are a member. So, merci à toi, Florence. Yes, we'll have a good evening, Vincent. The next hour, I'll be living it up.
David's put all the biscuits and chocolates in the house away.
It's awful. I was desperate for a biscuit today. So I started on the cheese biscuits, the salty ones. It's bad. I got through all those heroes, Stephen.
Really? Gosh.
Whole load. It's awful, isn't it, really?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. When we've got public, he says I deserve it. That's not what happens when I'm not in a webinar. Oh, we got a grade 9.
We did.
That's nice.
I don't suppose we can't really get a speaking endorsement tonight, can we? they haven't heard enough of it.
So I'm copying the chat into a document now.
You don't have to do that. It will save. This is all saved as a document. I mean, you can do it if you like, but it will come out as a document.
Yeah, but that means I can start to edit it if I can't sleep later on. And we've got an endorsement as well from EB15.
No good.
Do you know about saving chat? And I think I've made it so that everybody can do it. So you can just click next to the word file. There are 3 dots, and at the top it's got save chat, and that will save it automatically.
Right.
As a
I just copied all the text and pasted it.
I mean, as a host, you can disable that. But, okay, so shall we? I think possibly the people here now, the people who perhaps aren't there anymore.
Yeah.
This is how it's really, we now see who's really there or who's actually gone off.
EB15 is there because they've just put a little thing in the
Oh,
chat.
sorry, EB15. Shouldn't speak badly of you all.
And others may just have had to go to the bathroom or something.
They could have done. That's right.
If you write goodbye in the chat, Helen, they'll understand that you waited.
Okay, yeah, we shall go now. I'm intrigued to know who EB15 is, though. So good night, everybody. Good night.
David, did we do okay? David?
Yes, how are you?
Did we do okay?
I did very well indeed. Good
Okay.
teamwork as always. No,
In fact, I don't think I got prodded once, except I obviously got it. I thought at the last minute you'd said, "Oh, go to the end and I'll do the chat." That's why I carried on. So very good that you stuck with that point, because I wasn't really prepared for that bit.
Yeah, but Stephen is
Yes, I was really relieved.
present.
Okay, I'll put good night, everybody. Right. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you. And I will.
Thank you.
I'll just tidy the PowerPoint to make sure that it's you know, the links work and all that sort of thing. And then if I send that to you, Stephen, to arrange to have it linked on the website, and I can put it, you know, elsewhere as well.
Yes.
And then the recording, I'll just put on, for the moment, I'll just put it onto my normal YouTube, shall I, and send a link.
Yeah.
Until decisions are made as to where AWL wants to keep things.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay then.
Bye
See you
then.
on
Bye
Saturday.
bye.
Bye then, everybody.
Thank
See you
you.
Saturday.
Yes. Bye.
Do I have to wear a hat for the party?
Yes. Are you coming, Jane, to our party, Christmas party? Saturday
Oh,
evening,
when's that?
AWL London, it's Christmas party at 8 o'clock. And we're going to play games. And Stephen has, well, you see, we didn't advertise this, did we? All these things.
No, we're slipping up here.
Should have done this. Yes, and Stephen, you said that because someone did throw out that they felt we really needed an anthem for this.
Mhm.
And Stephen apparently has written something for us.
Aha.
Oh, EV15 who's saying we can have
It's
biscuits.
still here. Yes.
You're still here. You're just proving, EV15, that you are here. I tell you what, because obviously I've got the address of everybody who's signed up for this in the message which we can send, which Stephen, you normally put something together, don't you, as to, well, here's the link and blah blah blah, and we can then perhaps also include, and don't forget there are these events you can come to as well.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
we liaise on that, Stephen, shall we? I'll put that in.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
Good night.
Okay.
good night.
Right.
Thank you all.
Bye then.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Special goodbye to EB15.
Yes.